today. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. It's enjoyable. Yeah, can't look forward to it.
Yeah, so just to give you, I'm going to give you a quick introduction. I think for the last, well, what I have here is the last 9 years or maybe 10 years, you've been the coach of the under 16, under 18 Irish national team.
Yeah, and 3 years prior to that, I did 2 years assistant under 16 with Mick James,
Right.
Dan Connor James's dad, and obviously rest in peace. Though he was a very very good man. He really kind of gave me the ropes, and then I had a year under 18s the following year with actually coaching Connor James and Dan James under 18 with Tommy Hare. So, and then that's when I kicked into the head coach's role. So I had 3 years as an assistant before I kicked into the head coaching role.
Yes, I remember Tommy here. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then you've obviously had some experience. So just like, again, discussion points, like you had some experience, obviously have some experience with the Super League men's and women's. So you kind of did a year in the women's Super League as well.
That's right. Yeah, it was I've always credited that year really with probably the evolution of my half court offensive philosophy in one respect, because the game's a bit slower and I kind of had to come up with new ways of creating separation for the girls and defense and stuff like that, and it was a thoroughly enjoyable year. And we, obviously there was, we did a very successful year, and we only had one American where everybody else had two at that year. And, we lost Anya McKenna for a good chunk of the year. So kind of having to learn how to develop young players. I mean, it's probably been what I've always done really, wherever we've been, because we just haven't had the money where we've been with Demons, Glanmire, Neptune, UL to kind of compete with the big boys. So I kind of always had to coach it up, for want of a better phrase. But that year, I mean, we had Anya. She didn't play 4 weeks before the cup semi or before the cup final, and then Nia got the 4 fouls. Actually, had a discussion with Grania. Was it Grania or somebody else? Actually, no, it wasn't. There was one of the Black sisters, Amy, and she was talking about like why I made that decision, and I said Nia was on 3 fouls, and I didn't want to take the gamble. I mean, I actually watched the game a couple of nights afterwards and realised Nia was on 4 fouls, not 3. So I even left it go a little bit too long. So, but I mean, I think at times you get lucky as a coach, I mean, you get lucky with decisions. You're planning stuff, it doesn't happen, you just take a gamble and you get a bit of luck. I mean, Anya hadn't played. We didn't realise at the time that Anya had a broken foot for 2 months prior to it. She didn't play for the rest of the season, really, I think, after that. So I think she used up all her pain threshold for that game, but you do get lucky. I mean, any coach that says they don't, they do. Like, I mean, you make choices at times, or you don't make choice and you get lucky or whatever. I mean, plan really wasn't to play Anya a whole lot. And next all of a sudden she comes in and, Amanda ends up not playing for the rest of the game when Neil goes back in. And Amanda had been a stalwart all year. She had 2 threes early in the game in transition. So, I've always been a coach on feel rather than going in with a certain rotation plan. You have an idea of what players can play, what positions and stuff like that in certain situations. I mean, I coached with Doug Leichner really for a year, that year that he had a very successful year. They won the treble with Demons. And I mean, we go in and on this minute this guy is going in, on this minute this guy is going in, and it was really structured, and he knew who was going in for who at a specific time, regardless of the score line, regardless of what was going on. And it was a very interesting insight. So you kind of have both sides of the spectrum, which...
Yeah, that's interesting there now you said, because I've noticed that for players particularly, they nearly prefer, and let's say guys who are in the rotation but not getting big minutes, if they're not sure about when they're coming in the game, from a player perspective only, they prefer to know. So they prefer a coach who's like, you're getting 10 minutes off me. Like I remember when I played professionally, I was told that I'd be getting roughly X minutes and you'd be fighting for minutes off the bench by a coach. But actually, and it's interesting because I just chatted to some other people about your style of coaching, just because I wanted to understand like what was your style. I haven't watched yet enough because I only moved back. I keep saying this to people, that's my excuse. I've only moved back. I haven't seen coaches enough to get their style. But your style is described as like, you do prefer like a fast-paced transition if you can, and you just mentioned that. But obviously there's half court side to it, and that's becomes bigger as you kind of move up the levels particularly. But yeah, very much read and react, and you can even see with your style of like, let's say the minutes for players, it's very much like what you need at the time. And I think in my head, that's a great way to do it, just because you might be playing a game and they might bring on somebody you're not expecting, and then you need to react, and you can't have these set minutes. You can have an idea, but you need to be able to react and adjust based on what they're doing. Because otherwise, it's not a chess game. You're just going in with a fixed mindset, and you can't react. So I think, I'm not a coach, but I think it makes sense to me anyway.
It's something that has frustrated players. Not going to lie. I mean, like,
right.
One guy could be the sixth man one day, he could be the ninth the next day, and it is frustrating. I can understand where it is, but at the same time, I suppose when you're at that level, it's about finding the right choice. And I'm not saying I've always found the right choice. Probably made more mistakes than good ones, but I just feel comfortable in knowing that if X player is a good shooter and a solid defender, and X player or Y player is a finisher at the rim, there's no point in putting in a finisher at the rim if we're requiring a shooter, and that guy may have been an 8th man or a 9th man in the previous game because we didn't need that skill set and so forth. So that's kind of where my thought process is.
Yeah,
I'd be evolved over time, but that's kind of where it is.
Yeah, that sounds really obvious, but I mean, it's not something every coach will do. Sometimes you're looking on the floor, you need to actually see. For example, the classic one is where's the mismatch on the floor?
Mm-hmm.
Where's their weak point, and what are you going to attack? So you would base your player on different games. I mean, I'm going to give an example. I don't know the season's over. For example, Mark Keenan was very good against us. He had to pick the American because you can only allow one American on the court. So he would put Darren Towns on against us because he knew last year we were kind of undersized. So putting pressure on us inside and then playing that inside-out game and then allowing their shooters to score, that worked against us because and he left, let's say, Puff, and Puff got no minutes. And at first I was kind of thinking that's kind of crazy that he's leaving Puff off the court because he's a really good player and he could do damage, and he really didn't see much of the court against us. And I was like, I wanted to see him play. I hadn't seen him play, so I was thinking about it. Then I was like, well, that makes complete sense, So he's playing, and then other games, Puff played a lot of minutes against other teams, and I was wondering why. So it is very much horses for courses or whatever the term is.
Question. Yeah.
You have to play the players you're going to play against.
A good example last year. I mean, we had Justice, and not this past year, but the year before with Neptune, and we had Justice and we had Le Mans, and obviously we wouldn't be pressing as much with Le Mans. But if we did need to press, but keep Le Mans on at the same time, we went to a zone press as opposed to a man-to-man press. Whereas with Justice, we were able to have that unpredictable style of are they going to go man, are they going to go run jump, are they going to go press. Zone or whatever it is, but with Le Mans it was a very clear, distinct of what way we could do it and what way we couldn't do it depending on what we had to do. So I think there are pros and cons to having two different style of Americans, but I think so. Like when we take point guards, for example, to the Euros, we kind of talk about do we need to keep the same style? Do we need we Paul Kelly and CJ, two very, very, very different style of point guards. So like we had a splash scheme that only CJ ran, and we had a high scheme that only Paul Kelly ran. So, and the players knew specifically that if Paul's on the point, we're not going to run splash, and if CJ's on the floor, we're not really going to run, our high scheme or whatever it is. So we kind of had to break that down. And then obviously CJ played the 2 and he played the 1 a bit, and then he got hurt obviously against Belgium at a crucial time. But I think you kind of have to, and then it's the preparation behind all that of those situations, So and even the very first head coaching team, we had Roy Downey, Paddy Sullivan, and Kevin O'Hanlon. And Kevin was a year young that year actually. And but our 2s that year weren't great ball handlers. And I didn't feel that if Paddy or Roy got hurt, that one of those could slot in as the backup PG. So Kevin ended up getting selected, which meant that probably a more senior player got left behind, and we got roasted for it. And then obviously Kevin goes on, and he's one of the top point guards in the league right now. So, and the player in question that we left behind isn't playing at all. So, so we kind of, it's difficult to make those decisions. And one thing I always grapple over is having people's destiny in my hands in terms of who's selecting. It's gut wrenching every time. I mean, I kind of get quite emotional every time that I kind of do it, and people think it's a
an easy
put
decision.
on it, but it's not. I mean, like you get really connected, especially when you get down to the 18, 15, heading into the last 12. You know, and I hate the word deselected. I hate the word cut. So I always kind of, when we put it out, it's the 12 players selected to go to the Europeans. And I think it's a,
Yeah, that's good.
you know,
Right?
we're in a PC way, and as assertive as people think I am, like there is that kind of
Yeah,
soft touch there. Like I don't like saying that you got cut or whatever. It's just that we're taking these 12 players that got selected to go to the European Championships, and I think there's a way of doing it. I made mistakes over the years. I mean, I could tell you stories of how I've done it and the mistakes I've made and sending wrong emails to wrong players and stuff like that. So it's happened, but you know,
yeah.
it's part of, you know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I mean, like you see it at the very top level, like you know, the at the NBA level, guys getting snubbed for All-Star picks and stuff like. And you might there's an argument to say that he could have these guys could make or the USA team or whatever it
Mhm.
happens to be, like it's not an easy decision, and that's what's so difficult about it. That's
Yeah.
you're kind of put in there, and yeah, you're right. These kids' destinies, like you said, like maybe they stop playing or whatever. But the point is, you have to pick the best 12 guys and pick a balanced team. So that's what you have to do, right? It's you know what I mean.
I think the one thing that, you know, I probably kind of made public is that I think at times we treat our elite section of the sport as a participation. Oh, it's his turn next year, so we take this guy and stuff. That I think the reality is that that section of our sport is an elite element of the sport, and we have to treat it as such, and we have to be extremely particular. I mean, I reckon looking back on the last number of squads that we selected, if we were going on a one if we were going on a singular game and back, and then going on a singular game and back rather than going to a 12-day event,
Right.
I think some of those selections would have been a lot different. So
Interesting.
I think selecting for a 10-day event where you can't substitute in and out is a different selection process than, say, for example, when the senior men and senior women that time were going away on a Wednesday, coming back on a Thursday, being in a home game on a Saturday, and then the same the following Wednesday when they're in the qualifiers. And I would be interested to talk to Jerry at the time, Jerry Fitz, to see would he have selected differently if he had to do what, say, Mark had to do with the senior women's, and Mark Heenan had to do to go to an event. Would they make up their squad a little differently because of potential injuries and stuff like that? So I think they're interesting debates on how we select players at times. Has the process of a 10-day event affected some coaches on their
Yeah,
selection process?
that's an interesting dynamic, and I wouldn't have actually even thought of that. But you're arguably, yeah, on a 1 day you might pick a guy who's more talented, but you might think if it's a 10-day event, I need an extra big guy.
Mm-hmm.
I need an extra big guy because this guy could get injured. We're playing against bigger teams, whatever the need is for a 10-day event, and you're worried about maybe injuries and how guys will last over those days.
No
That's
question.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, again, a lot of factors come into it. You have to make those difficult decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start. I got a few quotes here, right?
Sure.
So positive quotes. There, you'll be glad to hear. So I've heard a few quotes. Nobody more committed. Best young coach in the country. How old are you now?
39 now, so I'm glad to see
I'm 36, so I'm right behind you. So your company. So intensity, toughness, and high standards. And I think for me, that's great to hear that because I think those, especially things like intensity and toughness and having high standards, that's a great thing when I heard that. And obviously, you know, you've had some success at the underage level. So, I mean, obviously that's stand to you, but I think those three things are great to hear when you hear about somebody. And passionate and direct is another one, which is, again, that's just your style. Everyone's got a different style, but that's good.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned the fast-paced stuff, the read and react transition. Do you feel like on a defensive level now? This was just based on what I had heard. Do you like to kind of? Because I know that Cork. I remember I grew up with Nick Murphy as my coach in Longford. I don't know if you know Nick Murphy, but it's a club called Longford Falcons. So we used to play. Yeah, we used to go down to the. There was a tournament in Cork, and it's probably still going actually underage. what's the
Billy Kelly.
Billy Kelly, yeah, Billy
Yeah.
Kelly tournament. And we used to go down to that, and then Mick used to describe the Cork teams, and it's probably well known in basketball, but real always like full court press, that style. I assume you grew up with that style and still like that kind of style of like
Yeah.
press. And I remember playing against my memories again, but like it was a guy kid called Jason Barry, and he took the ball off me so many times. I was playing for the Midlands. I tell you, I was still scared about it.
Yeah.
But that intense pressure, that defense is very Cork style of basketball. And is that something you ended up taking with you onto like those national teams for underage?
Before I go into that, just to let you know, say one thing about Longford Falcons. Actually, John Keegan was on our first Irish team with Mick James. Actually, so he played with Longford Falcons.
John Keegan. Okay.
Yeah. So he would have been. He'd have been 6'7", 6'8", great kid. Had a really good Europeans. I think he's out in Thailand now or something like that. He's traveling. I'd see him on Instagram the whole time and stuff like that. But he would have been on that first Irish team with Mick James at the time with myself. And I guess like when it comes back to transition, I suppose I didn't play at the highest level. I stopped playing at 15, kind of when playing a bit of soccer. Came back into a bit of coaching. My brother came into first year, and in my school it was only ever a girls' basketball team, and the teacher up there, Martina Deneen, was coaching at the time. I remember approaching her. I was in fifth year, and my brother and a bunch of his friends from club had come into school. It was the first time we really legitimately had 10 players or 11 players that could actually play somewhat competently. So my brother said, "Look, will you push?" And I had just come off the president of the student union, so I kind of still had a little bit of influence in some stuff. And so I kind of pushed Martina Deneen to kind of ask for a boys team. She said, "Look, I don't really have the time, but if you coach them, I'll stay behind, do my corrections, and I'd have that all done, and the boys will be able to get in there." So I said, "Look, I'll give it a go." I kind of fell in love with it, and kind of went from there really more than anything else.
You were 15, did you say at the time?
17.
17.
I was fifth year.
Wow.
So, I think I just turned 18 actually, 17, 18. And so I got into that. But I remember when I played, I enjoyed the tempo and the energy that transition, fast-paced kind of gave. So I kind of felt like if I'm not the most athletic guy in the world, I never was. But if I enjoy getting up and down the floor, then surely other kids are going to. So I kind of broadened in that way. And then, my brother went to the States after his leaving cert. I remember the summer before he went away, I had just gone back playing casually in one respect with Demons and Damien Kennedy, Paul McCarthy, and Brian O'Connell, and all the really good players. I had played against them the whole way up when I was with the Northman, but my dad asked me to just kind of look after my brother going to the States, so it was kind of like a jump kit for me more than anything else, and just kind of play a little bit. And I had just come off the first year of coaching and got to the Poconos, and then got to know a couple of the guys there, and just kind of threw my neck out there and said, "Look, any chance to come back and do a few weeks next year," and all that sort of stuff. And went back the following year, did 5 weeks, and the following summer after that did 7, and the following summer after that did 11, and just kept going back and forth. And we ended up going to Pete Strickland, my brother, to do camp when he was at Coastal Carolina. So kind of just built on from there, and kind of fell in love with more and more, and getting to know people, and working clinics with Bob Hurley and Dave Hopla and Kevin Boyle and all these guys and stuff like that, and just kind of the intensity that they worked at, and the love that they had for it, and the details and care that they had for the kids, albeit that they were getting after him. I don't know if anybody remembers Terrence Williams. He ended up going to Syracuse and walking across the Poconos at 6:30 in the morning in the dew grass, and St. Anthony's were having practice, and Hurley was just giving it to him, and I'm like, oh my divine word! Like, and Hurley's down here like 5'10", looking up at Terrence Williams at 6'8", 6'9", and same guy plays the back of the wing of Syracuse, so he's quite mobile at the same time. So, but it was just so fascinating on the everyday basketball, and it's something I've always desired to be at, but just never been good enough to get there. So it's but yeah, that's where I kind of got my love for coaching, and then started realizing there was other areas that we could go to. So I started getting down into working Davidson camps for the last 13 years with Bob McKillop, and did a bit of Duke camps and things like that, and just get to know more people and more. And then kind of felt like that it was a bit too direct, and started looking more into European style basketball. And then the last coaching committee here with, I think it was Mark McGettrick, Francis, Joey Boylan, McEvans, and they brought in Don Smith from Canada, and just completely changed my way of thinking on how things were taught. And since then, I suppose the last 5, 6, 7 years, I really kind of reinvented my style of coaching and how it was taught, and I think it's actually really improved a little bit. But yeah, so that's where I kind of get with, but staying with transition and then developing some actions out of it, developing some flow schemes. And so we kind of now have situations with the national team where we have flow schemes, dead ball schemes, and deep schemes. So we kind of really differentiate where we want to go to. And so our flow schemes would be directly out the alignment that we have in transition, and then dead ball schemes would be, say, the opposition committed a violation or whatever, so they're already setting their defense. That would be dead ball scheme. And then we'd have deep schemes, so like we know it's in the quarter, or we want to take the air with the ball, but we know we're going to go really deep, so it's kind of deliberate. Whereas other schemes are kind of like, let's take the first option we get, and I think that's it's evolved over time. But the ideal scenario is that we just play, but at the same time there's still a bit of structure and naming spots and where we want to get to and things like that. So that's kind of where the control kind of comes back in a little bit.
Right, okay. That's really interesting. I didn't realize, so all of these camps that you attended, Poconos, and you went back, obviously at the start you kind of went, you enjoyed it, and you just kind of went back. Just go back to that point, and we'll come back to some of the styles in a minute. So assuming this is all off your own back, you went, you enjoyed it, you said, I want to go back and do that next year, and you kind of kept going back, and you developed relationships with some of the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, it's kind of contagious when you see high-level coaching. You're like, I'm really interested in kind of getting into this more. So then you said you went to you're reaching out to these coaches through connections that you have in Ireland, or from going to Poconos.
I've been just very fortunate. I mean, Pat Price was the one that kind of got me into connecting with Bob McKillop. I actually got back off of a long stint in the States, and I get a call the day I arrived from Pat saying, you better get up to Kilkenny. He was doing Kilkenny camps at the time, and I said, Pat, I'm jaded, man. I just can't get there. He says, you get your ass up here. So I ended up getting in the car, getting up there. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't know who Bob McKillop was at the time, and I'm just out in the court, and I'm just giving it everything I have, and didn't realize who it was. And I saw this grey-haired man at the bottom of the court, and I was like, oh God, some cranky grandparent is going to be giving out to me here now because I'm getting after everybody and stuff like that. And so next thing I get off the floor, we're getting into lunch, and next thing I tap on the shoulder, and I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble here or whatever. And next is Bob McKillop saying, look, if you want to come work camp next year, then here's my email and off you go. So like, only for Pat dragging me up there, I probably wouldn't have had those wonderful experiences, So I've been very, very fortunate that I've had people that have looked out for me in one respect,
Yeah, that's incredible. Pat seems to have, listen to his podcast as well. He seems to have a massive amount of connections, more than obviously a lot of people realized. When you see the people that he used to work with over there, it's quite incredible. We might come back to Pat in a bit, actually. But then the kind of, you said you were at some of the Duke trainings as well. Again, is that kind of through Pat, or like, is that again just you reaching out to people, or just like?
I tell you what it was is like, you're just, when you get to these camps, like, you're just kind of, you don't sleep because all you're doing is just trying to network, and you might get sleep at 3 and you're up again at 6 and stuff like that. And the one thing I think that I enjoy most about Davidson was he creates Bob McKillop creates an environment where it's nearly impossible to go out, and everything is provided, and you're just kind of chatting with everybody. And like, even to this day, like, we're, one of the great things about Bob McKillop is he just reaches out to you anytime, every now and again. You just get a message, you're like, oh, and even when it's not his voice, it's just like, he's just so not intimidating, but just kind of, you're just, oh God, it's right. And it's just the aura is around, even when he's not speaking to you. And he just invited a bunch of guys on on a Zoom call over COVID, like of all the former staff members, and just kind of every Tuesday night in the camp, he'd have a late night X's and O's session of anything, and it was kind of like, well, I do this every year. I'm going to find another way to do it, even though we don't have camp this year. And that's just kind of how great he is, like that. He's just always trying to stay connected with people to figure a few things out and things like that. So, but only for Pat, like I wouldn't have had that connection. I wouldn't have had those wonderful experiences. So, like I am. Like there's loads of people I could be very thankful for. I mean, like Francis kind of got me onto Francis O'Sullivan. He got me onto the the kind of elite level, and starting out with school teams, with the BIPs and the Cork teams. I went from Cork teams to county board teams, to him saying, right, you're going to Neptune Stadium and you're going to talk to McJames and you're going to be Irish international assistant. And I was like, you're 23 years old, and you're like, man, I didn't expect to be getting this opportunity this early or whatever. But I've had some very, very fortunate people that have pushed me in the right direction. My wife probably won't be thankful for that, but yeah, no, I've just been very fortunate that I've had those connections because of people pushing me in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, but it does still sound like, I mean, you still have to take the time out to kind of go to these camps and get yourself better, and like you're still, the impetus is still, there's a lot of individual responsibility there on you to actually want to do it, and you obviously had the passion for it as well. But yeah, obviously you meet, but then if you're actively going out there trying to meet people and network, as you say, again, that's being a proactive about it. You know what I mean? Like it's not like it's not all luck, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think it is about, like, I mean, people say it's about who you know and what you know, but I also think it's about being in the right spot at the right time as well, and having the right people to say the right thing. So, like, I mean, the Duke thing was just like, yeah, I wouldn't mind working that camp and seeing what that's like. Phone calls made, can you take Paul next year? And all right, where you go, like, and so, but Bob McKillop taking that time to make a phone call to see, look, is there a spot there? And I actually ended up working it that year because somebody had pulled out and there was a spot available and needed a coach, so I ended up staying an extra bit longer. But yeah, I think, like, I would have never been the most forward pushing. I'm actually quite reserved when it comes down to it. And I suppose over COVID, like, I just kind of made a decision. It's either now or never. And I just started pushing myself out there and meeting other people and kind of getting people on Twitter and stuff like that, and seeing if they replied. And if they replied, great. And if they didn't, I wasn't going to be too hurt by it. You know what I mean? So I just spoke to some really great people over COVID, and I think the coaching community has really shown that they're willing to share. And I think I've certainly become a better coach over COVID because of higher level people being willing to talk to somebody who's as low level as me, and kind of guide me along some things that I probably wasn't as good at that I thought I was. And then realize and talk to these guys, well, shit, I need to do a better job at this, I need to do a better job at that, I need to do a better job at this. And you're like, I'm actually a failure as a coach. I haven't done as good as what I think I have. Do you know what I mean? So you can be humbled very quickly,
Yeah, I think as you start to look out, and again, you kind of have to, if you want to set the benchmark for yourself in terms of coaching or playing or basketball generally, it's not, again, I don't like using the word bubble, but when you're in a country, it sometimes can be that you're, as you say, you got good that you have high standards, but the benchmark you're setting yourself, like, for example, when you went to Europe for the first time, you must have set a whole new benchmark for yourself when you went back and coached Irish kids, because the benchmark becomes what you see there, not what you see at National League level. It changes the level, the standard, because you just played against it and you're like, okay, I didn't realize there was so much more to learn. I actually heard Jay Larranaga talk about when he went to the NBA on Pat's podcast, and he said, I thought I knew everything and I didn't know anything, and I'm just scratching the surface. So it's probably that bit of, like, you go up to that next level and you're like, oh, okay, I was missing a lot there, and I didn't know I was missing it. Yeah. You think you know something, and then you kind of go to that next
level. No question. I mean, like, the amount of people that would say, like, this team should have done better, or that team should have been done better. And I've seen people, like, saying, oh God, that guy's having a terrible European Championships. And I'm like, you really don't know. I mean, like, I've seen players that have been 5'7" here and shoot really well in National Cup finals and so on. But the player they're against is 5'7" as well.
5'7".
And then they're going out to Europeans, and people say, he's having a horrific Europeans. And I'm like, no, he's not. He just hasn't seen somebody in front of him the way that he is seeing right now. So it's a whole new arousal. It's a whole new environment and things like that. And like, but they were a great team. No, those one or two guys are like the end of a bench for like the top 8, 10, 12 teams. And like with the boys, we're struggling for years to make top 16. Like if you look at our results, we've barely made over to top 16 twice in the last 10 years. You know, and we've had, I mean, I've been very fortunate to have some really good teams with Sean Jenkins, Adam Drummond, Keane Heafy, Blake Murphy. And we struggled that year for a whole bunch of reasons. Yet we came away with 3 wins, which had never been done in the previous 10 years. And Pat's team with Dave Dehan, Sammy Fujana and Paul Kelly did a really great job. And they finished 11th. But prior to that Roy Downey, Paddy Sullivan team were 15th. And the last team to do anyway before that was Martin McGetrick's team with Gil Martin and a couple of other guys. I can't remember their names at the time. But the boys side, we were struggling to make top 16s. You know, so when plans come out, I keep telling people, like, we were 4 seed last summer. So we had the last 2 summers, we had really competed well under 18, and we were 4 seed this year, which gave us a chance to be closer to that 3rd seed. So like for us, with the girls are on a different trajectory than the boys are right now. And then there's no, you can't compare the 2 of them because it's completely different.
Right.
But like we were always a 5th or 6th seed. So it was always going to be difficult to get out of that. And you're always kind of fighting for those last 1 or 2 games to just be competitive and not be in the relegation game. And last year, because of the previous 2 results that we had in Kosovo and with Dave Dehan and Sammy making top 16, we were 4 seed last year. So it meant that we had a better chance of beating the 5 and 6 seed, and therefore we had a shot at the 3 seed, which then would raise us a seed up again the following year. And that's what I kept saying. Like when you talk with the women's, and they've done a tremendous job at 16s and 18s last couple of years, finishing anywhere from 12 to 2nd on a consistent basis. We're just going against better athletes, more pros, guys that are doing it every single day. But the size difference is huge. I mean, I had a situation last summer with a couple of our players that are really, really good players. They're capable European level players, but their size put us in a situation where we're just getting passed over. And it wasn't there were hurting us. It was the size was hurting us. We'd only 1 guard over 6 foot last year in Dave Dehan, and we were just getting passed over. As all the great things that we did, and you just don't realize that you get there. And the boys and we were still in games when we were only losing games by 6 and 8 points and missing 7, 8, 10 free throws down the stretch and things like that. So we were right there every single time, but just the size hurt us from time to time. And it's different. Like it's a different level, and they pick you apart and they realize it. And the coaching is at a serious standard, and they're doing it more often. I think the biggest thing that we face in the men's game here to go to Europe is end of game scenarios. And I think if we'd had that experience with last year's team, something different could have happened. But like when you're kind of winning games by 20 and 30, you don't know how to manage games consistently when they're 2, 3, and 4 points. And that's a learning in itself. It's a skill set in itself. And it's a coaching skill set in itself. And as coaches, I don't think we face it often enough unless you're in the Super League and things like that. So, you know, and the one thing I've said as well, which I think is a huge thing for us under 18 men's and the 16s, have done a wonderful job in the last couple of years getting really good competitive games. And we've increased that over the years. I mean, when I started 13 years ago, we couldn't get 1 international place, not 1. We had to go to Austria to play an under 20 regional tournament in Vienna, and that was the only preparation game we had. And we just couldn't. Not even the lowest of the low of teams would not play us. We just couldn't get it. And now every year, 16s, 18s, 20s, we're getting invites to Bulgaria, Portugal, you name it. We're getting there because they know we're getting competitive now. But but we need more of that, and we need more finances, and we need more help. We need more governmental help. We need more money. So we can compete more at both levels. You know.
That's really, really interesting. The under 16 and under 18s that you've been able to kind of go to, are these tournaments that with other national teams, or some of these elite academies in Europe? Is it kind of both sometimes?
No, I mean, I think like we're in a great place in one respect with the under 18 men's and women's, in that we now are in a situation like as I said, last 2 years, 21 of our 24 players going to Euros would have either been Super League players, Division One players, or abroad. And they're getting that high level. And I think it's great for us. I mean, like CJ playing Super League for the last 2 years, Paul Kelly, they understand the physicality. You don't have to teach them seeing or the effort. It's just coming in. What's our scheme of play? How are we going to play? And let's just get better at it. And I think if we can get to that level more often, and with 16s trying to find that level of competition for 16 players, I think we're going to see huge improvements in Europe, but we just don't get it. So like when we go against Georgia, I mean, Georgia, most of their team had come off doing 20s already. So we lose that game by 7, and we're like, and we nearly had them. We felt we could have had them only for 1 or 2 inexperienced errors down the stretch. We come up with a 1-3-1. We practiced, so like, this is my mistake. We come out of a 1-3-1 against Ukraine, and we had practiced the whole tournament, and CJ was at top. And then for some reason, I allow CJ to go. Sorry, we had CJ on the wing the whole time, and then we always have our big on top. I allow CJ to go to the top, and their guard just comes over, scoops over CJ into the corner, hit a 3. It was a 4-point game, 7-point game at 90 seconds to go, and we're done. Whereas we thought we were coming out with something that would really scramble them and things that. So I think under pressure, again, would I make that choice again? Probably not. Keep CJ on the wing, force him onto the side where CJ is, so we have better size on the weak side. So, these are things that we just need to experience more. The players need to experience more. The coaches need to experience more. And, I've always been trying to get international games here. We've had Luxembourg here. We've had Norway here last summer. We'd Scotland in Castle Island, we've played England here. We just had trying to give the kids that home international experience as much as they possibly can as well, I think is good. But we just need more competition, and in order for that to happen, I think we need more money and we need more help.
More money, more help. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if you see, probably I don't know if you're watching the podcast, but we chatted to Lloyd Gardner, and he's like Barking Abbey Academy in the UK. And he said that when they started going to these European tournaments, that they were getting blown out by 70, 80 points. And it took them, he said, 4 years to kind of even, and you can probably testify to this, like that to even get to the point where you're competing, just to understand the level that you're meant to be getting to, and then to train for those events. And it's probably been a similar journey, but it sounds like you're kind of moving towards that, and you're going to get to that point then where you're going to be able to compete, turn up these tournaments and actually compete. And you can see the standard of players getting better. I know this year you're going to have a very good under 18 team, and that's gone to the win. We'll come back to that one. I have a few questions on the under 16, under 18 part of it. I'll fire through them quickly. But like fundraising that's it's almost a marketing skill, like it's almost a part of the skill, a separate skill that you need to have for underage team that you don't arguably you don't need to have for the senior team, but I don't know if that's a part of the job as well. You shouldn't, like you should have maybe like a team manager there that just like takes that on. But are you also taking that then on as part of your job and having to find like creative ways to come and raise funds so you can actually go to these competitions? Is that part of your job as the coach?
I mean, like it's a lot of money. I mean, I think we've done a really good job over my time with the teams, that we've always tried to help them as best we possibly can. I mean, we've done last man standings, we've done bagpacks, I've ran a marathon, we've done pitch a puck classics, we've done. I could keep going. We've raised tens of thousands over the years, and it's not something that we should be doing, but at the same time, I've always felt that while we shouldn't do it, we have to do it. So therefore, we've run day camps. I remember the first thing that we did out was with Stephen Hanlon, Jordan Blount, Jack O'Mahony. We did a day in the arena. We nearly 50, 60, 70 kids for one day. And we charged, I think was it maybe €15 for the day, which was, I think, was a lot, but at the same time, we needed to create some money. And you know, to be fair to the people in Dublin, they came out and they supported it. We did one in Tralee last year before we played Tralee Warriors in a game, and Tralee did a wonderful job down there hosting us. And we had like 110 kids above in the new facility in the IT Tralee. Again, so like we raised a good chunk of money there for going away and things like that. And you know, Tralee had that Tralee Warriors game. We raised a chunk of money there, so I think we kind of raised over the couple of days. We raised nearly $2,000, you know. So, but you know, and I remember another time in Cork we did an alumni game where a couple of internationals from Cork played against. So I think it was Adrian Sullivan, Matthew Rudak, Ronan Sullivan, Roy Downey, a bunch of more guys, and we got to Mardyke and they gave it to us free. And I think we came out the other side of it of €800 and stuff like that. So like we've done we had good times. Like, keep going, like, but it's hard work, and there's times where I'm like, do I really need to spend more time doing this? But then you realize like the kids they're phenomenal kids. It's a different dynamic than coaching a club team or a Super League team. You know, it's, you know, I mean, you know, you share some emotions that you just don't share locally, because I know what Liz. I mean, like we left the floor last year. We were so close in a lot of games. Like Belgium was a close game. We lost CJ for the rest of the tournament on that one. You know, we lost a heartbreaker to Belarus by 1. You know, lost Ukraine with a heartbreaker. Georgia, you know, we had a great rivalry with Denmark after beating them in the Dustman final trophy, and we had them in our group phase again. And it was, you know, that was one of the more pleasing ones, because prior to the game we had a Division 1 coach come up and check out 1 or 2 of our players. And after the game, he said to us, I thought you were going to get spanked, because Denmark were the other end hootering and hollering, and we were kind of like, our S&C and our physio were phenomenal last year, and they just really knew how to get the boys engaged. And he said, I just thought you were just dead. And next all of a sudden we come up, we're 35-13 up, and he's like, he just blitzed them. And it was only after the game when he said it, was like, yeah, that was a really, you know, satisfying win because of a perception of somebody saying something that you didn't think was going to happen, you know. So
right, yeah.
But then when you go through the whole event and you're kind of like, the final whistle is blown and you've gone through some adversities and things like that, like the emotion that can happen inside in the dressing room or on the center of the floor before the game it's just a different, it's hard to leave. I mean, my wife said, would you ever just stop doing that? And like, yeah, I think I will this year, and then I'm going again next year, and then I'm going again next year, and it's just love it.
Yeah, it's probably the intensity of it as well, you know, because it's high stakes as well. So it's like, it's the bit of a rush as well when you do get that win or get that sweet victory. It's kind of that's what I'm just thinking.
I remember one year, I mean, we were out in, where did we go with Drummond and Jen? Oh, we were out in Sofia, and we were playing Czech Republic, and we were supposed to get absolutely tanked. I mean, we were supposed to get tanked. And there was a couple of people went out to the game just to kind of watch 1 or 2 of the Czechs. And next thing, gym is kind of mostly empty, to be fair. And at half, we were giving it to them socks. It was like a 2-point game at halftime. And people must have made phone calls, so you need to go to this game. And we went right to the wire. It was like 98-94 at the end of the game. And it was a humdinger. We lost by 4, and you'd swear we were after losing our lives. But it was a humdinger against, obviously, a top nation at the B division. But like, the place had come to watch the boys, and they got such a kick that like they were able to make people come to the gym to watch them. And there were small kind of victories like that have happened along the way that you kind of say, if we can just build on this, if we can just help these boys, help the other boys understand the experience that they need to work for, then I think we can make the step. And I think Pat's made that step with the 16s. You know, we have Endy going away now, and we've, you know, Moby, and you know, we're getting the new generation of Irish kids coming through, which is fantastic to help us get to the next level a little bit. And we've got Rap, you know, Bourvidas, you know, you've Leroy Odiahi, and you've got our traditional Irish kids of Paul Kelly, CJ, and David Han, and you know, Ben Burke's coming through now, and you know, you've all these kids coming through, and it's just an exciting time. And I think we just need to kind of grasp it and run with it and just go with it. And you see all the girls, you see every week now we're seeing a new kid go to prep school, whether it's a girl or whether it's a guy, you know, and it's great, and it's at some point you're kind of saying how much is it going to hurt us, and the next point you're kind of saying where will it benefit us, and if we're in it for the right reasons, it's going to benefit us at the right level, which is the top. So
Yeah.
are we willing to help them go become better, where they can do it 5 days a week with more better players, with where we
Better
can benefit
facilities.
at the top, and that's where we might be able to get the funding. So it's are you comfortable leaving that happen as coaches, so the kids can get the best experience to come back and help us make the next jump, where the next, so when you see it every summer and every World Cup where the kids are playing soccer because Ireland made the World Cup, or with the rugby, or All Ireland final weekend, I think we have the potential to have that euphoria with our sport, and we need to find a way to it. And I'm excited that we will get there eventually, and I think we're getting back to that.
Yeah, and you do. I've seen a lot more people. And I've kind of said it on Mike Bree's podcast, or from Mike Bree's podcast, from his kind of era back then. Now, maybe again because the opportunities weren't there as well, but there seems to have fanned out the number of kids that have gone to America and have had the opportunities maybe as well. I'm not saying the talent wasn't there, but certainly basketball seems to have gotten progressed a little bit over here since then, just because so many people have put in the effort behind the scenes and they laid the foundations.
Yep.
You know, all of a sudden there's 5 guys in the next generation after Mike, like the Paul Cummins maybe, and those kind of guys,
Yep.
Connor Grace, and now you can see that there's even more people kind of heading over to America.
Yep.
And yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute, because I had a question around the options in Europe versus the options in America. But I think you're right. I mean, you are starting to see a lot more people go to the States, and I guess the idea is that they will come back, and as you say, because they have because they're able to play 5 days a week, because they're able to play against better competition, and because they're able to have the resources there for whatever they want to do, if it's strength and conditioning or nutrition, or if it's just getting in the gym and getting shots up or working on their game individually. That's something that they can do probably better over there than maybe we have the supports, infrastructure in place here to do. That's
no question. I get calls, all the time, and saying, should I go now or whatever it is. And the first question I always ask any player that wants to go, I said, first of all, what's the ambition? Because I think depending on the ambition, the process might be different. And they all say, well, I'm just going to go over and check it out for a year and see what happens. Or some might have a legitimate interest, and some don't have a legitimate chance of being in D1, and some of them do have a legitimate chance of being D1.
Right.
But the one thing I always say, and I've stuck to this, and this is how I've always been able to give my advice, if you want to be D1, you've got to go right after junior cert. You cannot, and it's not that the coaching isn't good enough here. I think the girls have that chance, and we've seen a couple of girls in the past that have been able to go D1 from here, or just jump in a prep school and get that D1, because I think the opportunities are far greater. But for the guys, if you're going to go D1, you have to go after a junior cert. And if you look at the guys that have gone D1, right? Paul Cummins left after his junior cert. Jordan Blount left after his junior cert.
It's like 15 then. You're like 15? Yeah, 15.
Right?
Yeah.
Sean Jenkins is probably the only one. I wouldn't say he's the only one, but he's the only one that comes to my mind that has been fortunate enough to get it done in 2 years. But if you're going to talk about going D2, you can get it done in 2 years. If you're talking about D3, I would say stay to your leaving cert. You get a D3 from your leaving cert anyway, maybe a prep school, whatever it is. And that's kind of the way that I've always approached it. So I think there's a process and there's an understanding of the level that you're going to understand the progress you need to make the D1 level. And we have so many kids that I think are being guided incorrectly. Oh, you go down to your local gym and you're hammering the guy that's not really at the level required. Oh, you're going here, you're going there, and you're going there. I think we need to understand where they're going, and we need to understand how they're going to be coached. And I've probably lost a lot of relationships with players that have gone abroad because they've perceived me to be too hard on them, and then called me a year later and said, I'm now ready because you told me this was going to happen. I'm not saying I have all the answers. There's so many answers I'd love to know. that I could have helped them in a better way, or been a better coach to them, or even being a better person that I can engage with them to get them to the level that they wanted to go. But the one thing I've always stuck by is, I think if you want to go to D1 and you have the potential, I think you have to leave after your junior cert to get that 5, 6, 7 days a week, to get to even just get used to the environment. I mean, my brother went over after his leaving cert and played a year, and he said like the season was finished before he even got used to the
intensity too late,
and things like that. And ended up being a 4-year D3 guy and had a great time. That was his own business, and he doesn't regret it. But at the same time, he said, if I'd gone earlier, would I have got that D2? He was never going to be D1. He knew that, but would he have got that D2? You know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, and it makes sense actually what you're saying, because again, and this is just from these podcasts that I've been doing, like Mike Bree, he was a guy that went over, and he said his first year was tough, and he didn't have really anyone to call up. He didn't have, like Paul said, he had Mike, Paul Cummins, and he was again the kind of generation after that.
Yeah.
He had Mike who reached out to him and helped him and said, look, listen, you're not getting minutes, and you're an Irish guy coming into a setup where these guys have played at a higher level in high school than you have. You were a big fish over here, but they're all as good as you over there. They're all athletic. They're all as tall as you. They all been coached by better coaches, and the list goes on of variables that you have over there that are just at a higher level, right?
No question.
So it's a case of like, if you can get them into that environment, like you said, 2 years earlier, so that it's not such a shock to the system if they do get an offer, and they peak even, at whatever age they peak, to try and get them in as early as possible into that environment and that at that level, so there's not such a huge catch up, and then it's too late then, like you said. So it makes sense that you would get them in there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no question. I mean, and even the choices that they have to make at the rim, or the choice, I mean, you talk to a couple of guys that went away. I mean, Dara O'Sullivan with us, and Adam Drummond, and Sean Jenkins, and Connor O'Sullivan, all those boys that have gone away the last few years, like they'll tell you, like, it's, when you get that athlete that's coming down and dunking on you that you've just never had the experience of before, it humbles you very quickly, and you got to figure out how you're going to handle the physicality, how you're going to handle the contact, how you're going to handle the quicker pace, like the different style of refereeing, the getting up at 6 a.m. I mean, like, I've had kids, I'm like, you're going to struggle. No, I'll be fine. And a month into it, like this, I might be ready to come home. I might be, I just can't handle these 6 a.m.s and stuff like that, and coach on my rear end and stuff like that, and it's people want this, but they got to know what they're going into as well before they go there. And it's, I mean, I look at Kieran O'Sullivan, who I've coached, and the learning he brought back from Trinity Pauling and Adrian O'Sullivan. And so I'm looking at, I mean, I'm going back far as Niall Murphy. Like, Niall Murphy was there for 2 years. I mean, he was close to signing with Boston University, and came home. So, like, I mean, you've got to know what you're going into. I mean, it's every day. It's being on you to go to study hall. Can you handle that? Can you handle the academic side of it? The constant assessments, having to maintain your GPA, having to sit your SATs. Not too dissimilar here, but it's, you just got to know what you're going into.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I know STA Paul tries to help with the academy there, and you coached with that. Okay, I've got a ton of questions here, so I'm trying to get through some of them. Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. So, the national team, I got a couple of questions. Was it Danny Nielsen? I asked him to give me some questions. He had a few. He's a good guy. He was just at the run last night, actually. He was saying when you're coaching at the European national teams, he was really interested in, like, you've obviously done it for such a long time at that age group, and he was asking, like, so what are you doing for scouting those teams? Like, what? Obviously, you kind of mentioned the length a bit. You talked about the physical differences. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear what you're saying about not just the length, but the strength-wise. Like, when you see these guys, these young Europeans, because again, I have a little bit of experience in this. I've seen some of these underage German players, 2 of which were 16 on our pro team in Germany. And I seen what the way they were working out,
Mm-hmm.
and even their under 16 team, which I help train in the gym. They're all in the gym a couple times a week, and you know, so I seen some of this stuff happening, and I'd just be interested to get yours to when you went there first and how you've seen that play out in terms of the physicality from a strength point of view. Uh, Maybe tactical differences when you coach in Ireland versus when you're coaching in Europe. So he was asking those kind of questions, and I just think it's interesting. So the scouting, the physical differences, and like if you coach differently in terms of your tactics.
Yeah.
There's three parts to that.
I guess like with scouting, it's like it's always the first team. So like we get the draw, we get where we're going around November, you know, late October, November. The draw happens usually anywhere from early December to
It's
just before New Year. That's just my laptop or my sorry, it happens every single time. It's every hour. So yeah, so like it's I never really worry about, especially the third place things. You're going to see them twice anyway, whatever. But you try and work on some actions. You try and work on. And I thought Kieran O'Sullivan really pushed me a different way last year. And I mean, he just brought a different mindset. You know, I feel coming back off that Europeans, I'm a better coach from the questioning that he posed to me, and how we do certain things. So, you know, you've got to have some general actions that are going to occur. So like you see a bunch of Iverson cuts, you see obviously ball screens, you'll see some flare actions, so you can generally kind of work on those. I probably Stephen O'Hanlon, Liam Harris, Martin Neary, Jack O'Mahony, Jordan Blount, David Kyoka, that team finished second in efficiency defensively that year in the entire tournament. Offensively, we were way down. You take Drummond team with Drummond, Jenkins, Paul McNulty, Liam Chandler, rest in peace, Dave Murray, you know, Adam Donoghue. We were in the top 7 of all the offensive scorelines. All our players, some of our players were in the top 2, top 3. Defensively, we were in the 23rd across all the bottom. We were awful defensively.
Right.
So you're going to get teams that are committed to it, and you're going to get teams that are not committed to it. But I think the one thing that, you know, I really felt this past, and we're touching on something that you probably want to touch on later, but this past team had everything. They had the ability to lock down defensively. They had all that sort of stuff. But I think when it comes to scouting, there was a time when I just couldn't get a tape of Georgia, and they were playing out in Belgium. And in my stupidity, I spent 48 hours. I flew into Liège. I hired a car. I went down to Liège, and I walked around for the day, got to 2 games, watched them live against Belgium, and then went back and slept in the airport and flew home the following morning because I couldn't get a game. But generally, like, I think it's getting easier now.
Right. Okay.
Where like when you don't know coaching staffs, it's harder. And I suppose I've been around a long time. I can contact somebody who might know this guy, who might know that guy, and eventually we can either trade, or what you're looking at is, let's say you're looking at other groups. Oh, I hear they're playing each other, and you might contact them, and you have somebody that they're playing at the European Championships and things like that. So it's definitely a network thing, and it's definitely something that you kind of have to be around a while for people to trust that you're not going to give away their stuff. And there is a trust element of it. And make no mistake, I mean, I might contact Mark Reynolds and I might say, look, Mark, let's trade a tape here. But I know that Mark Reynolds is also looking at somebody else and might trade the tape I've just given them.
Right, I was just going to say that.
So there is an element of that, no matter how friendly you are. So you just got to be careful of who you're giving stuff to and where. I mean, I think we got to, I think the year that I was with, about 4 years ago, we got to a place and they were waiting for us at the door. They knew we'd played a game, but they couldn't get in contact with me. And they were waiting for us off the bus. Swap. And they hadn't a word of English and they swing the USB, so I knew exactly what they were doing. So you kind of get to know the kind of,
that's hilarious.
Where you get to know the body language and what they're waving, especially, you know, certain countries, they're so assertive and they're like in your grill and you're like, it's nearly like, if you don't, we're going to come and get you type of thing, you know. So like it's.
What's the etiquette like? Could you turn around and say we're not giving you like our tape?
They'll know. I mean, to be fair to most to the Europeans, they'll have something to change it. No one's just going to come up and say, well, we just want that game. everybody knows you've got to give something to
Right. Okay.
swap it around. So like we're in a hotel room exchanging USBs and hard drives and all this sort of stuff and getting it done in 20 minutes and high five, no English, and away you go, but you've done the deal. And so you're you know,
Okay, right. So it's
yes,
really just like you just have to kind of go get after
it's, it's fun though. I mean,
the
it's
Wild West.
yeah, a little bit like the Wild West. But then once you get into after the first game, you have at least you have something for at least game two. So
Right.
really
Okay.
kind of focus on the first. But this year, I mean, we've got a really kind of basketball knowledgeable staff. I mean, our physio is Andy McGeever, or sorry, no, our SNC is going to be Andy McGeever, or physio is going to be Igor, and then Niall Berry and Dan Russell coming back. So we got 4 guys that understand basketball, whereas usually if your physio kind of it's just a physio, or
Just a
your
physio.
SSC is just a SSC. So we bounce some stuff up, and we give some jobs to do, and hopefully we get ahead, on some stuff that we may not have had in the past. I mean, last year we only had myself and Kieran, so it was a lot tougher to get that done, But yeah, I mean, it's. I think the one thing that I've always enjoyed about going to Euros it's the only place that I personally get to feel like I'm a pro coach for 10 days or 12
Yeah.
days. And you're kind of living it, and obviously your family are at home, and so you don't have to. You're still trying to be in contact, but you're just so engrossed 24 hours a day for 12 days, and it's a great buzz, and you're being around the boys, and you're able to be around them and get to know them, and you're still getting to know them at that, because you don't see them away from the floor, you don't see them away from the hotel very often. So
Yeah.
it's just an amazing experience.
Yeah, and just even to be able to see the talent on the other teams at that young age, just before they're about to become, senior men, that's when it's like you can see you can see the potential in some of these players, Irish players as well.
I mean, like, we were very fortunate. I mean, we had a team with Dan Sull, Connor James, Dan James, Kieran O'Sullivan. Who else was there on that team at the time? But I mean, those boys got to see Thomas Adoransky and Jan Vesley. I mean, they're the same. Believe it or not, Kieran O'Sullivan is the same age as Jan Vesley.
That's crazy.
we got to see those boys playing the European semi-finals that year against Slovenia. They actually lost. Imagine that, Thomas Adoransky and Vesley, they lost to Slovenia, and we got spanked by Slovenia in the same year. But yeah, so that was like, and they're cool stories that you're able to bring back to see those type of guys.
Yeah, that's incredible. So yeah, then just on that, then I suppose that segues into like the guys like that. I mean, they're obviously so long, even at the guard spot. Some of those guys, like, I mean, maybe Jan Vesley's more kind of a forward, but some of those guys, they have almost like guard-like skills, like that positional style in Europe that you see a lot of guys have. I know it's a bit of a buzzword, but like the physical differences, so the length, but also the size. I mean, like, are you seeing that? Like, when you're coming back to these championships, are you seeing the strength training that these guys are at a young age? Is that something that's obvious?
Well, we're behind. I mean, it's not. It's common knowledge we're behind. But the one thing like that we teach right now is, like, our first couple of practice sessions is how to take contact at the rim. I mean, it's a huge part of every practice session that we do. Footwork, balance. We now call it explosive stance. So you're always in that position to get away. How to create separation to make a pass away. Like, we're going to be, like, this year's team. I mean, you're talking CJ, you're talking Sam Alajiki, Rap, Andy Okafor, Ty Crowley, Leroy Odiati. All big boys, that can handle the length and the physicality. We're going next year, and we're kind of back to where we were 2 years ago, where we may not have a guard over 6 foot. We may have 1 or 2 over 6'3", 6'4", but we're going to struggle in the guard spot lengthwise. So now we have to be prepared for that. How do we create separation? What actions are we going to use? How do we make sure that our guards are going to be able to find a way to give the ball to Andy Okafor? That they're not getting smothered by their big long guards. So, like, and they're very much aware of it. So I'm not saying anything that they're not aware of, and it's something that they've already kind of identified. Like, what they finished, last or top in turnovers in that previous tournament, and they recognize it. So they're very much aware that it's a major improvement that they have to make, and I don't think it's anybody's fault. I just think it's that we just don't have that level of competition to prepare them to go there before they go to the 16s. And I think our performances have always improved from 16 to 18s. The results may not have improved, but our performances have improved. And I think that's a sign of progression that we need to continue to carry over, is that we identify and understand the progress that these players are making between European championships.
And from 16 to 18, that they have had that experience and exposure to that level. And then,
I mean, like, the boys were very upset last year that they came back and hadn't achieved what they had achieved with Pat. And, you know, I was upset for them because I felt that I failed them in a couple of different areas, both on and off the floor. But the one thing I said to them at the end of it is that we left with so many invites to tournaments the following year because of those boys, because of their competitiveness, because of the way they carried themselves on and off the floor. And people recognized what they had achieved and what way they warmed up. I mean, we had S&C coaches around our S&C coaches asking what they were doing and how they were doing it, because they were impressed in how they prepared our boys for games, and they believed that we competed so well because of how our physio and S&C prepared them to get mentally engaged, physically engaged from tip-off, you know. And I think that was a huge credit to Pete Madsen for now, and Kevin Foley for recruiting those type of guys that can help us. And you know, when you're a young coach, your ego kind of says, what's the value of this? What's really the value? And I mean, my undergraduate's is in health, fitness, and leisure. I mean, my master's in sports psychology, you know, so it's like, you know, what's the value in this? And your ego is like, no, my coaching is going to get them to that level. When in reality, your ego is actually preventing them from having something extra that can get them over an edge. And, you know, so I think we competed, but what we forget, what people forget is that, especially in the boys, you're talking about kids in Georgia, Ukraine, you name it, in that area of the world, and they're just about to start getting into pro contracts. Right. So by the time they leave the 16s, they're going into pro scenarios. Our boys are coming back to playing schools, to playing clubs, may touch National Super League.
Yeah.
And after a year, before they do get to that level, the boys we just played on 16 have already had a year as a pro under their belt. So when we expect to get the same results or better at 16s and 18s, I think it's an unrealistic thing to look at that. Right, but we need to look at performance levels and what outcomes are we looking to achieve to make sure that we continue to improve. But now we have the SSC coming into the academies, and I think we won't see the benefit, I don't think, for another 5-10 years. Until it becomes part of the culture and the norm that that's what our athletes do. And I think we have a huge challenge, but I think if we embrace it, I think we're going to really excel. But if we continue to flip our hands at it, I think we're always going to be the nearly ranks. And we used to have a phrase for years: don't be the shoulda, woulda, couldas.
Absolutely.
We should have done this, we could have done that, and we would have done this if we had done this. And I think it's one of those regretful phrases: don't be a shoulda, woulda, coulda team.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, well, that's really good, and I totally agree with everything you're saying. It was interesting. I talked to Marty Conlon. He was on. So Marty was talking about when SC came into the NBA, and as late as the early '90s, people were still not regularly lifting. And he said when he got into the early '90s, that's when people started lifting, and then he noticed that guys that weren't doing it were kind of falling off. So it takes time in every kind of area of it, and you kind of have to. It's not just bringing it in, but it's also the culture of it. So, like, in America, they have a culture of, even at a young age now, getting into the lifting and the explosive stuff, and I mean, there's a whole, it's a whole other conversation about a whole other aspect of athletics that you're bringing into basketball at a young age, which there isn't a culture of here traditionally anyway. Basketball, like, I certainly didn't do any of that stuff under 16. I remember doing it like a jump program or something, like underage, to try out.
That was the thing.
So something like that, right? But it wasn't. There was no emphasis on it from our coach. Like, I remember, and that's not to say that it's anyone's fault. It just was, the culture wasn't there, but also the knowledge wasn't there. Like, sports science has progressed immeasurably and is still progressing.
No question. I mean, I graduated in 2006 from IT Tralee.
Yeah.
And within 2 years, I was behind. I went down the psychology route, went to do sports psychology masters, and in 2 years, I had changed. I remember Jerry Fitz telling me that we get it when the professionals are done with it.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So like they would pass it out when they no longer need it. When there's a new thing comes along, we get it out. The pros have had it for 10 years. They no longer require it. So now let's dish it out to the public. So like we're always behind.
It's as quick as tech almost, like the way the rate at which it develops, it's exponential. And keep up with the latest. I mean, one of the great ways of doing it is actually, and this is kind of a bit of a makeshift of what I would have done when I was strength training, is to just go onto YouTube and then start like researching stuff. The problem with that sometimes is you're getting a mismatch approach for different athletes, and you're not getting something that's a program specific to maybe that athlete.
And we even say it there now. I mean, I spoke to a bunch of coaches as well, and they're talking about like, you're learning new things off of YouTube the whole time, COVID, but you're not getting the experience of the real life. So you don't really know the feel for it. So like if we learn a new drill or a new action or whatever it is, yeah, that looks great, and I'm going to run that boomerang action, or I'm going to run that pistol action, or whatever it is. But until you get on the floor and you really test it with your players, you don't really have the feel for it. And then you're saying, but why didn't I ask that question? And why didn't I ask this question? Because you didn't have the feel. You just understood it at the time, but you're not getting the feel for it. And it's the very same, I think, with S&C until you actually get the feel for it.
Yeah, I talked to an English, because there's a similar situation in the UK, right? So I talked to a guy called Jamal Anderson, and I'm going to put his podcast up soon. So Jamal's on the GB team now. He didn't go to America, and I said to him, in terms of S&C, this guy is, for want of a better word, shredded. And he's also had NBA athleticism. And he told me he was very late blooming. He was like 20 by the time he kind of like peaked. From a basketball perspective, he wasn't like necessarily that good underage. I think he started when he was 15. So very late to the game, super athletic. And as I say, is now in the GB, ended up playing professionally in Australia and a few other places. So he became a legit player. And I remember coming across him when I was over there at age 21. And this guy was just like, he just catches it off 2 feet, my size, super quick up and down the court, and just dunking everything. And he was literally head at the rim type stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've seen him, how he's developed now. And I said, you had a lot of guys coming back from America, from the UK, and they had been, the way he described it was because they had kind of been spoon-fed the S&C stuff. And I said, so what did you do? And he goes, you got to put it on yourself. It's individual responsibility if you're in the UK. And he said, you're a younger player, if you have an S&C guy ringing you every day going, did you do, send me the video of your stuff, I've given you the program, it's maybe, this is what I've experienced anyway. I played County Gaelic one year, and I come back from Germany just having scheduled in training slots with a S&C coach 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then we also did some stuff before training with bands, etc. And then in Durham and the BBL, same thing. We had a S&C guy come in every single day with us and work with us. And that was fantastic. And that was spoon-fed to me in those 2 years. In America, it sounds like similar situations for other guys, right? Then you're getting, I come back to a Longford Gaelic team, and this is the next year. Now, whatever about Longford Gaelic, like we're not going to get into that conversation, but it was just interesting to see the contrast, because I was handed a 3-page flyer with some very rudimentary exercises and given to the Gaelic guys, and I can tell you for a fact, none of them did it. None of them. And the reason they didn't do it is because your man didn't put in any effort. He didn't follow up one time. There was no structure put in. Yeah. There was no scheduling of it. And I was just sitting there going, this, lads, if you guys think you're going to compete for it, that's why one of the reasons I didn't go back. There'd be no Gaelic people watching this anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. Like that's the truth of it. Like I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. It's and things have changed now. I know that they've brought in some S&C guys that are taking it more seriously. But like when you're handed a flyer, or not a flyer, but a 3-page printout, and you're told to go and do that, and nobody does it, and nothing is said. Yeah. I was just kind of scratching my head, like thinking, we are prehistoric in our
Yeah.
approach to this. Like,
Yeah.
and look, again, it's a culture thing, and it's a knowledge thing, and it's you can't expect, like, obviously it's an effort thing as well, and there's individual responsibility there. Like the idea was there to get the individual to kind of approach to it. So then I started thinking, like, where else is this occurring? And I don't, and again, I don't know. It sounds like Kev and those guys have kind of come in and they're starting to take the reins there in terms of the S&C stuff. So that's really positive. But it's definitely one thing I noticed when I came back. I was like, I hope this is not happening in basketball over here. I hope that kind of that sports science is now leaking into the culture. You could see it in the Dublin team. I mentioned that on the previous podcast, and it's obviously starting to come in. But like you said, these things just don't happen overnight, and it'll take 2 years. It'll take 3 years.
No question. I think the one thing though I will say is this: there are more and more young guys doing it themselves.
That's great, yeah.
And I think, when I started with Super League with Demons, Kieran Sullivan had come back from the States, Dan Sullivan had come back from the Canaries, and they were living it every day. So they'd started the culture. And then you had guys who were about to retire, and it was just like, yeah, we've a year or two left. Do we really want to start changing this now? So like we were kind of caught between two areas.
Right.
Whereas now it's like if I look at the young guys coming through in Neptune, they're all an S&C. They're all
right. Okay.
So it's. I think the culture. I think just the national landscape, really, of everybody being in the gym has helped with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you turn a corner, there's a gym everywhere now, essentially.
Who did I see? Was it Sam Alajoki? Is that how you pronounce it? Sam
Alajiki, the one.
Alajiki, sorry. Yeah, he was just hitting the gym like an absolute monster, and he's posting videos of himself jumping, and like as silly as that may look, like that is impressive. He was like touching his head off the rim, and I know it's like that's not everything, but like that, like even for example, like a Lorcan type where he's on Instagram posting videos of himself, and again, like Lorcan's developed as a player, but one of the things that has helped him massively is his physicality and his ability.
Lorcan was on that team with Roy Downey and Paddy Sullivan out in the
right.
So and Lorcan at the time was just an athlete. He was a high jumper. He was great kid. And had some really, really tough situations out there. Had some great games out there. But I just think that it's, while they're silly gimmicks that we might think that they're hitting there, it's a confidence thing too. It helps people realize, yes, S&C does work. So if they're seeing a guy that can hit his head off the bottom of the rim, and 2 months later he's hitting off the top of the rim, this S&C stuff works.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden it's, I need to start doing this. So if it's working for here or for him, I'm going to start it. So like, it is a marketing thing. It is something that like you have to buy into. You have to see the results. Maybe it's seeing somebody else have the results and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, like I think we all have a responsibility to help the next people coming through.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether it's coaches helping the next coach coming through, whether it's the next, like I mean, we're doing workouts in Neptune, and it's such a joy to see players that have gone away, coming back, being in the gym with guys who have aspirations of going away, and giving them the feedback that they've learned. And you're stepping back and you're just facilitating a drill, but they're teaching each other. And I would have never been that way before. I would have been like, no, you be quiet, I'm teaching and all this sort of stuff. But now I'm kind of embracing what they're bringing back. And it's an absolute joy to see them do the teaching, and they're picking up one or two things, and all you're doing is just facilitating a drill. You're giving a couple of things that you're looking for and allowing them express themselves, and it's really, really good to see.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you have, again, I try and think of it as a fan coming out, but you have now more guys coming back that have played at a higher level that can now start to, and it's about dragging those guys in and being like, come along to the training session, come along to the clinic or whatever it is. Like Jordan is doing some clinics there, things like that. That you get those guys in and talk to the players and tell them, this is the level you need to get to. This is what you need to be doing to play at that level. so that they're not kind of they're hearing it from an Irish guy and they're seeing a guy who did it, and they'll actually listen to that. So it's super important. And there's more guys now that have come back and played at a higher level that can actually pass that information on, and it's an individual effort then. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, the strength stuff, I probably said it before in the podcast, but it's one that stands out for me, and arguably it's like not a quick win. Actually, probably not a quick win. It's probably a slow burner, that one, but it's definitely one we can have more focus on. That's interesting. Just aware of time here, we've only got on for an hour and a bit. So we'll come back to the under-18s team that we missed out on in a minute. In terms of talent identification, athlete development, changes you'd love to make for a player before a player gets to the national team? Is there anything like at a club level that you could? I mean, if there's one or two things that you could, probably the strength stuff would be great if you could just get them
the
to
strength stuff. You know what? It differs every year when the players come through.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I've had a discussion with a couple of assistants over the years. Like, we really don't teach our defensive philosophy until maybe February. We don't start touching. We teach right now. We kind of teach an awful lot of offensive stuff, how to make proper choices, how to create the choices. You know, using specific games of purpose to get what we need to get out of them offensively, because I think they all translate to everyone's offense.
Right.
The problem with defense, and I've had my fair share of, I don't want to say conflict, I don't want to say run-ins, but fair share of, how do I describe it, kind of healthy debates, I want to call it now. It hasn't been healthy at the time, but of how you guard on ball, how you help side defense. And I think that's what changed, that's what's different with every coach. Every coach has their own philosophy in that. So I used to get very, very frustrated. And I suppose after 2013, I made a decision that I'm going to try and experiment with not doing our defensive stuff until maybe February after Paddy's, and then really hammering it home once the season finishes, because they're only listening to what we require them to do.
Right.
Whereas we were constant. So like some coaches will still, albeit that it's outdated, will still show middle.
Right.
We don't show middle. We show end line, and we have certain things that we want to do off of that, and we want to get deflections, we want to get traps, and we want to do all those sort of things. So you get a guy just coming in and he's showing middle, and you're getting annoyed with him, and you want to show him, but then he's going home and he's not coming back to you for another 4 weeks, and he's gone back to showing middle, and I'm just losing my hair here. But yet, if I show how to come off a screen, if I show how to do a handoff, if I show how to go back door, they can all translate into anybody's offense.
Right, I gotcha.
So they're the things that I've started really focusing on is more the offensive stuff early in the program, and then around late March. And if I feel that like they're all on the same wavelength, we might touch it a bit earlier. And we still do some defense stuff. I mean, it's not that we don't do any defense, obviously, and we still give our teaching points. But in terms of what we really want to hammer home and the style that we want to play, we generally don't do it until like March, close to the season finishing, because then it's what we're getting them to do.
Right.
And
I never
we see
thought
them
about that.
more regularly like that. So I think you learn. I mean, the best, you know, I've slagged Shane. I haven't seen Shane in a good while, but I'd often message him. I wouldn't often message him, but I'd message him every now and again when something would come up that would remind me of our time at Demons. But, you know, I think Shane, as a player, taught me so much, because I was that coach that went from coaching 11s, 12s, 13s, 14s, winning a Billy Kelly with a very, very young team, to following up, going straight into as a Super League head coach.
Right.
And had that kind of, how would I describe it, that kind of old style control of everyone, like always be on balance, no fadeaways. I was, you know, that type of guy. And I had to learn very quickly to adapt to a Shane Collins style of player who, regardless of what was going to happen, Shane was taking the first shot of every game. It didn't matter whether I wanted him to or not, he was taking. And I was like, how am I going to handle this? And I learned very quickly that, you know, and I'd always slag Shane again when I'd see him, like, it was like I had to learn to kind of give Shane choice, but really it was my choice where I wanted to shoot the ball from. So I kind of throw out 2 or 3 schemes where the shot was going to be taken from the same spot based on the scouting report, but it was always Shane was going to take the first shot. So like it didn't matter. So I learned to kind of help Shane take the shot that I wanted him to take rather than fighting him. You're not taking the first shot. So
Yeah.
I think that was the best learning experience I had because it helped me learn to deal with other things pretty quickly and how to adapt to the next level, which I never experienced. I didn't play at the highest level. I mean, I stopped playing at 17. And even that year, I mean, we played a massive schedule that year and, learned a couple of things. And you talk about kind of earlier on some of the things that people said, and I will put stubborn in this because sometimes like my principles, and I'm very principle oriented, and anybody that would speak to me, I nearly even let it get the better of me, and I nearly allow a loss just to make a point. And I think over the last year, having taken a break, I've kind of had to reflect an awful lot on that. And I think I'd like to think that if I ever get the opportunity to go back and coach at senior level, that I think I'd do a better job of knowing when to let the reins go. And I think, my second year, I mean, again, I didn't play at the highest level, so I don't understand what it's like for a body to feel like with a week or two to go. And I'd always have at the time, my second year with Demons, it was that year where BI moved the cup final a week later into the first week of February, and we got no rhythm going into the final. And we had to play 7 games in 4 weeks after the cup final, and we won all 7. We had 3 double headers in 3 weekends, and the boys were jaded. But that was actually, speaking of conferences, that was the last year there was conferences, and we won the Southern Conference that year. We beat Star on a Saturday night with Paul Cummins up there, and we barely got out of the gym. We beat him well the night before. I think it was like 30-35, and the following day we barely got out of the gym. I think Kieran Sullivan had to hit a come from behind 3 in the corner to get out of Belfast with the win. But the night before, DCU had to beat Neptune for us to play a Star on the Sunday to make it relevant, but Neptune actually beat DCU, so it was kind of, the game wasn't irrelevant, but it was, for me, I always wanted to win, so I kind of didn't leave the boys have too much fun. But yeah, so that week I only gave them the Monday off, and we came in the Wednesday, and again, not knowing what a body feels like, I ran the living hell because I was like, oh, we gotta get fitter and stuff like that, and I didn't really understand. And the boys were jaded, and we had a challenge game on the Sunday against the Dublin Inter, and in hindsight, if I had to do it all again, I'd have just said, lads, don't want to see you for the week. We'll come back with a fun game on the Sunday, and we'll see where we go. And we played UL, and we played UL 4 times already that year. We'd beaten them 3 times in the league, and we'd lost the cup final to them. And we'd actually beaten them by 4, I think, in the Mardyke a few weeks earlier after the cup final, after being up a lot at half time. And we got spanked by 35 in the cups in the league semi-final. And I'm fully convinced that if it was my bad planning, that the boys were just so tired. They just had no gear to go to. They had absolutely no gear to go to. And they're the sort of decision that you kind of, that unfortunately players, they end up having a bad experience, but you become better as a coach but you've got to sacrifice some shitty decisions. And it's just one of those things you just look back and you say, they didn't deserve that because of my inexperience as a basketball coach. And just love to have it over again.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. That's a brilliant example. And I actually have experienced it with a coach in the UK that didn't have that kind of high level experience and ran players like that. I've seen it before. And, it's great that you've reflected on it and that you understand that, because that is a thing like that. I definitely have seen that before. And that you've reflected and learned on that. And the whole thing is, your intention was good. So it's not that your intention was wrong, and the fact that you've learned from it now means that the next time you go back and do it, you're going to be much more empathetic, and it's definitely a pick your battle situation, like you said, like trying to be like it's like anything in life. I think I'm still learning that as I get older, like pick your battles, like because sometimes is this what's going to turn the dial for the team, like that, or in anything in my work, I'm the same. I'm a product manager, so I basically manage this team, like team of developers. And I used to be really inflexible. I wouldn't be able to let things go. I wanted stuff done the way I wanted stuff done, and that was it. And I didn't want to hear it. And then I started to realize that if you become that inflexible, you're just this tyrant almost. So you're like, and I had to let stuff go, and it's about control and all that stuff. And you realize you don't always have the best bloody ideas, and sometimes these people can be right, and it's that balancing act. So I've definitely gone through that, so I can empathize with that very much so. That's really interesting that you learned that, and I think that's something that players go through as well. That I talked with other players about not doing. They wanted to play a certain way, and the coach wanted something else for them, and they were not willing to give their trust to the coach to actually play with the style. And there's a guy, Flinder Boyd, who played with the GB team as well, and he said, well, maybe if I'm not able to play in his style, then maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. And he said he let go and did what the coach wanted, and that tension was taken away. And he said he had the best year. So it's a bit of a balancing act sometimes, but like it can happen on the players.
I remember when I went to Glenmire, and I'm not going to say our name because I think it'd be too unfair. But I had that first team meeting, and she stood up and told me I wasn't right for the team.
And, okay, I'll trade you off a story there. I actually coached the girls' university team in Aberdeen, and I had never coached before. So just to give you, this is the only time I've ever coached, and I will never coach you probably a girls' team ever again because of it. But I basically coached the girls' team, went in, and I started running them in suicides, and two girls basically told the rest of the team that they were leaving the team because I was shouting and screaming at them to run harder, and they didn't want to do it. I then went to the first game and told the bench players to get up and let the team sit down, and two of the girls ended up crying after the game and again wanted to leave the team. And I just had this terrible learning experience of like, you can't talk to people, just like you have to realize the situation and adapt your approach sometimes. And I at the time, I seriously thought I was right in what I was doing. And I was 23, whatever. And I was sitting there going, oh, I'm not putting on the kiddie gloves for these guys. Like, I'm going to tell them, but you have to adapt. That's the bit I learned after that. I was like, you clearly just can't do exactly what you want to do all the time and the way you want to do it. So, just interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, but at the same time, you kind of realize that, people are human, and there's only so much people can take as well. I've got just because I'm aware of time, I'm just going to turn on the light here. 1 sec.
You're fine. You're fine.
So I'm gonna try this new thing. So I wrote out a list of questions, and we're gonna do like 10 minutes. I'm gonna call it "Go Hard in the Paint," and I want some quick answers. Right? We're gonna see. So I'm going to just bounce through them. It shouldn't take 10 minutes. I was going to put you on a clock, but I won't put you on a clock. But I'm just going to bounce through these. You just give me quick, snappy answers, right? Okay, so this is going hard in the paint.
So that's to ask me to say quick, snappy answers, regretted the phone call. And he said to me at the start, I don't want your long versions. I only want your snappy versions. And then we ended up getting into another question. And he says, that's what I was afraid of. So,
I was chatting to Jordan Blount earlier on just about just other stuff generally, and he was like, ask him hard questions because he'll answer them. So I was like, all right, put in a bunch of. So let's see how hard you can go here. Okay, right. So I've got to put titles here, and I've got a quick question. So hoop dreams. Have you any aspiration to coach at the men's senior level?
I do.
Yes, you do. Yes, Okay, go with that. Okay, mind the gap. So imagine you're in London, you're on the tube. They have the mind the gap signs.
Yeah.
So, what's the gap for younger players in this country in your head? What's the one thing you're saying? The gap versus, let's say, European players.
I think it's hard to judge that until we ever get to a level where we have that level of competition weekly.
Okay.
I think we need to get to a scenario where our kids are experiencing having that arousal level of close and having to be held accountable for the 40 minutes regularly.
Regularly.
I think our kids only get that 2, 3, maybe 4 times a year, and they're not getting enough learning.
That's really good. And that leads into one of the next questions, the one after this one. Work-life balance. Have you actually got one? How do you manage your family life? Tough.
Yeah, it's the hardest.
It's the hardest. Right? Okay.
It's the balance. Like, I mean, yeah, like right now during COVID, I mean, my wife was working from home. My mom used to mind my daughter, and right now I've said, "You're done. I need you rested and recovered." I mean,
right.
So it's a balance of making sure when Cora goes to sleep and I can nip out for that hour and a half and work the boys out and then get home in time before she wakes up, so my wife doesn't have to get out of the office and stuff like that. So it's harder now than it was, but it's hard. I mean, and then going away in the summer, so it's hard. But I've got an amazing wife, and she's actually been there since the beginning. So only for her, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I'd say.
Supportive other half. That's a good. Give her a shout out there. So the academy conundrum. I didn't really discuss this in length, but do we need an academy in Ireland playing against other academies in Europe to turn the dial like Barking Abbey? And I don't know if you've seen the episode with Mike Breed. They have a Swedish academy, and he said as soon as they started going to these tournaments, and it's interesting, he said regularly, because he said they now don't even. I'm not suggesting this happens, but if let's imagine a world when we have endless resource and we have an academy in Ireland. I know Jordan mentioned he'd love to start one, etc. And maybe it's a pipe dream for now, but something for the future. Just imaginary. Suspend. What do they call it? Suspend your belief or whatever. So imagine we have an academy and then we're going to play regularly. Does that turn the dial in a big way?
Yes.
Yes. That's the short answer to that question.
I will say this. I think we need a culture change, and I think we need to let the egos go. And I don't care what backlash I get from that.
No, we need open conversations. That's brilliant. And I would agree. And Mike said I don't know if you've seen that episode, but he said once they started going to those competitions on the regular, just like what Lloyd said, the standard started to come up, and then all of a sudden they're competing with the Sabonis school. He talked about playing against them, and they actually got some results.
It'll only raise if the players recognize they need to raise.
That they need to raise.
Staff. I mean, it's all well and good me going in and say, right, we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to do this. If the players don't buy in and they don't understand why they have to raise, and if they don't let themselves be held accountable. And I think the biggest thing that we do here, and I think the biggest challenge for any young player, is making the transition from being a very, very, very good under 20 player, under 18 player, to playing senior. And the amount of players I've played with, the amount of players I've coached that have not been able to recognize their deficiencies and open up and say, you know what, I need to work on this. I can't just be that coast-to-coast guy that I was for the last 8 years because I'm just that much more athletic, that much more physical. But then don't develop the skill sets, because when you go and make that transition, the experienced guys like the Conor Meanies, like the Johnny Beans, all those players that have seen you before, not necessarily you, but seen you as other types of players. You know how to back off, know how to defend, you know how to get the separation, know how to keep the contact to screw you up.
Right.
You don't have the skill set. And I think that's a massive thing. And we need to stop telling kids that they're the be-all and end-all and be realistic. They're craving it. They're craving it.
Yeah, you're right. And it's, again, I think Mike had some wise words again, just having had so much experience abroad and not been in the Irish bubble, we'll call it, is that, he said, like, the kids think they're, like, this is a crude way of putting it. I don't think it's maybe fair, but like he goes, kids think they're really good, but they're necessarily, relative to some other countries, really not as good as they think they are. And that's not to say that the potential isn't there. So some of these kids are super, super skilled, naturally good athletes, but the potential is there if they add in the skills and going to the gym regularly, getting shots up regularly. Like, I'm talking,
Like, the one thing is, there's always going to be a better player than you, and there's always going to be a better coach than you. Right. And I'm telling you right now, like, I mean, I'm looking at some of the young coaches that are coming through, and we did it with the fusion clinics and things like that. And some of those coaches, man, they had the bravery that I didn't have to go away and test themselves outside. I mean, I always wanted to, but I was such in love with the Irish teams that that's what I always loved to do. Had I aspirations of going away? Of course I did. I wouldn't have been ambitious if I didn't have that. But the one thing I will say about the young coaches abroad that we were lucky enough to see is that they had the bravery and the desire to just go and say, do you know what? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I waited for it to happen. They made it happen. And I think that's the difference. And it's the very same with players. You need to have the desire to let the ego go and just say, do you know what? I need to be better at this. I'm actually good at this, but I need to be better at this. And if I get better at this, this will actually make me better at what I'm already good at. And I don't think that we teach kids to do that. I don't think that as coaches we think that way because we only want them to know that I have the answer.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point, and it's that proactive, that bravery. I think when I was a very late bloomer now, so I wasn't on the underage teams and stuff. But when I got to like 21, the Scotland senior men's coach actually saw me play, and I scored 30 points against the Scotland team, and he said to me, "You should think about playing abroad." And I kind of didn't really take it seriously. And my brother actually turned around to me and said, "If you think we're going to get discovered playing in Scotland, in Aberdeen in Scotland, Mark, because you can't, you're either going to go for this if you want to actually go for it, or you're not."
Yeah.
And whether or not you fail or not, it doesn't matter. But you're not going to, if you wanted to play at a higher level, and I obviously love basketball, so if you want to play at a higher level, you have to go out and try and put yourself out there and expose yourself. So it's and you're going to have to train by yourself and do it yourself. It doesn't just come in your lap, and you won't be sitting in a gym in Ireland somewhere and somebody will come along and find you. Like, if you want to do it, you have to push it yourself. And it has to be proactive, and you have to push yourself out there and do everything you can to try and make it as well. It's not a case of I'm talented and somebody will maybe discover me. How come nobody?
And that's exactly it. It's the regret I'll always have because I waited and said, "Yeah, sure, if I'm good enough, But you need to push it. You need to put yourself in the shop window." And I don't think I had the bravery or the ability to do that. And I'm very envious of the young coaches who have done that from our country.
Yeah, and it's definitely one look. And arguably, the shop window, as Paul Cummins said, it's not really here from even coaches or for players yet. But it's maybe as we start to get better and make more waves in Europe. Hopefully, then there will be more people interested in looking at this country and going, we want to look at these people. That was a longer question than we decided. Okay, so Super League. We're going to do a blitz on Super League, right?
Wow,
play both Americans, yes or no?
Oh God, yes.
Absolutely. And I think there's very obvious arguments of, let's say you're paying both Americans and you're not getting to see them. From a product perspective, if you're looking at just as a product, let's say we're saying it's a product, then it's a better product. Yeah, no argument. Where's Pat Price going next year? I don't have no idea. That's another question.
Pat's all mystery man. Pat's
right.
Mystery man.
Is he staying here? I assume he is. But who knows?
Assuming he is, yeah.
Right. Okay. You might not be allowed to divulge if you didn't know. Okay. The best Irish players coming back to play in Ireland. Will there ever be a day when that will actually happen? Let's say you get your Jordan Blount to your John Carroll, or let's say Adrian, something like that. Right now, they're not going to get better in this country, and their stats are not going to allow them to go somewhere else. That's
going to make the money they deserve to make. So
right.
I think we'd have to have a franchise, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Right.
Franchise to play in a league in Europe. I think that's the only way we'd ever get back.
Yeah, there's a couple of teams in the UK that are looking to try and do London Lions. Yeah. I know the Riders played in Europe as well, and they got gubbed, but I mean they're starting to talk about that, which is interesting. Again, their funds are. They said some of the players they played against, their one player was bigger salary than their whole budget, and. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. So the model of the Super League team partnering with the unis, for better or for worse, So has
I mean, look, I mean, the resources. I mean, I've seen it with Demons. I've seen it with. So with Demons, there's teams in there. I mean, NUIG and Mike Cullen. I mean, they're fill some stands, whatever. But I think we can do more. I think it's already better. I mean, I know I'm leaving out teams, and it's some obvious ones as well. So, but I think the sooner that we kind of do that, I think the more that we can help each other.
Right. Okay. We covered S&C, so I'm going to skip that one. Okay. So I've got conflict of interest here. So we run basketball clubs in Ireland as charities, not businesses. This needs to change. So we create a product, market it well, and compete with other sports. So do you think that's true, or do you think that's a bit like, nah, that's too black and white? This is a quote I heard a UK person say about the UK, and I thought, I wonder, does that apply to Ireland? And I don't think necessarily it does.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I mean, I'd love to see a franchise here, maybe even
Right.
two. It would be kind of cool.
I remember talking to Gareth McGuire when I was thinking of playing for University of Ulster actually, and that was their plan. That was their plan. I hope I was allowed to say that, but that was their plan to have a BBL franchise. And I don't know what happened, but I think it's a very tough ask, you know, just generally to have something here, and then you'd have a travel requirement. So
That's a great city.
Belfast is a great city. That is true. That is true. Okay, all right. Last question. So, yeah, this is here and there. So, are we losing athletes to other sports? For example, a very popular sport now, the new generation, rugby. They're recruiting bigger athletes now. Do you ever see yourself fighting for younger players because of other sports like that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, right. Okay. I wasn't sure about that. So that is actually a thing then.
Yeah.
That we do actually get guys that are. Is there any, specifically rugby? Do you ever see guys under
I
16?
think the GA and rugby especially, and not necessarily soccer, because it's a different season. But definitely, I mean, we've had our fair share of managing guys, of playing championship, and playing with us and stuff like that. So we've had our fair share of having to manage that, which is obviously not the ideal scenario, but
Yeah.
it's usually those starter guys that are playing both, so you can't really know yourself. So
The crazy thing is, like, I've been listening to a bunch of other sports podcasts, and you're starting to hear that these guys who cross train or play other sports, they tend to be better players because they develop a wider skill set of just their sports IQ is just better across the board. So you see these guys who played at a young age, a lot of sports tend to do very well in whatever sport they tend to specialize in. So that was very interesting. So actually, Paul Kelly, I heard, is playing Gaelic this year. I don't know if he's going to come back and play basketball, or if he's going to balance.
We'll see.
So you're right. Okay, it might not be able to just close those ones either. But okay, that's pretty much it. That was your 10 minutes there. I think that was pretty good. Yeah, we actually did under 10. Okay, I've got a final question, and it's from Twitter, and it was from Jared Jago. So he said, what advice would you give to your younger self, and what skills are not being taught at a younger age group, which you might have covered? But advice to your younger self, what would you?
I actually just gave that advice to a friend of mine who is going to be in the spotlight next year. And one thing I said to him is enjoy it more. I don't think I've ever portrayed that I've enjoyed what I actually do. That's a massive regret. I think the only time I ever enjoyed a game, and I've actually, it's amazing when you reflect on this, I think the only time I've actually ever really enjoyed the game is when you're the underdog, because there's no expectation. And I've had to really dig deep on that. So I haven't really enjoyed coaching when you're in the moment of being the favorite. Say, for example, maybe it's a young coach not handling pressure well. I don't know, that's another day's conversation. But I think the last time I really, really enjoyed coaching in a high pressure scenario was actually the Glanmire Cup final, because we were not expected to win, even though we had expectations to win. We weren't expected to win because, UL were coming off of that dynasty type of thing and things like that. And yeah, we'd beaten them a couple of weeks earlier. But I remember my dad saying to me after the game, it was like the first time he ever seen me enjoy coaching, essentially. And I smiled, and he was looking everywhere else, and other people weren't smiling, but I kept smiling through it all. And it was just like one of those things, but when you're in the moment, you're constantly going from Super League to National Team, Super League. You don't get a chance to actually reflect on those comments that other people have passed through you for all your time. So like it's the last year I've been able to kind of delve into those sort of things and try and kind of say, yeah, why didn't I enjoy that? Why did I enjoy this? And what's helped me kind of, you know, want to be in coaching and kind of really identify your philosophy where you probably I haven't had time for that. So like you know, I mean, I spoke to a friend of mine the other day and I said it was like the 4th of August we came back last year from the European Championships, and while I knew I wasn't going back to Super League, I had some thought processes of what was going on, but I really haven't had just air to breathe and reflect since the 4th of August. And I'll never forget, the minute we landed, I was like on to the next thing, kind of saying, right, what do I need to do here to kind of, one, get back into being a better coach of Super League? What do I need to do to be attractive to a team that has aspirations of winning, rather than being in 4 situations where you've had no resources, you've had no money, it's all been youth. So you've always been a developer as opposed to being in a position where you're expected to win, you know, stuff like that. So like so when I ask myself those questions, I suppose the question to answer your question would be, enjoy it more, show that you enjoy it, but control your emotions. And I think one feeds off the other, and if one dips, then the other is affected. So I think they're 2 really good things, and that's all I would say is enjoy the moment and control your emotions.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, sure. I'm in the same boat myself. So, yeah. So, what skills are not being taught then at a younger age? I think we kind of covered it, but
well, I suppose to add to it is like, I think all skills require a certain thing, and I think, you know, one of the things that I'm a big terminology guy. People probably know that about me too. And I think explosive stance, and I think that includes balance, it includes defense, it includes finishing, and it includes catching to shoot, always being in that explosive stance. I think that's something that's not being taught. It's the old triple threat, but I just think that it goes beyond just pass, dribble, shoot. It goes, being in that stance now requires you to jump, it requires you to play defense, it requires you to run, it requires you to always be in a position to play the game, and stuff like that. So I think that's one thing. And I think being dynamic and teaching how to create choices for others. But I think they're all kind of skill sets. But I think the one thing that I think we need to really teach our young kids is appreciate other players' success. I really do. I think we all think when we're developing young players that that's skill based, but I also think teaching them how to be a great teammate. I really do think it's something that we really need to teach. And it's just like, appreciate that somebody's giving you a good pass. It's not always about the end result. I mean, like, I always say that winning should not be part of a 14 down. I mean, we have John Collin tournament in Cork. That might be the first process by where we're trying to. I'm not saying don't teach winning. I'm not saying don't teach competitiveness, because I've seen kids that haven't been taught competitiveness that are really good, talented, and they just don't know how to compete. Right. So I think teaching them how to practice, teaching them how to be a great teammate, and teaching them to be balanced. I think everything else will fall into that.
Yeah, I think you've hit 2 things that are and I don't know if this is necessarily just in Ireland, but the first one around the explosive stance thing, something interesting that when I played at a higher level that I noticed that guys don't do when I come back and see young players, even for example on my team, that are good Irish players, that I can just see that they don't have is practice habits, like when they catch the ball. I remember watching there was an NBA team, was it the Philadelphia 76ers came in, and I was listening to the coach talk, and when he made them come in and catch the ball and receive it at the perimeter, he wanted them to explode forward and catch it ready to rip through or to pass, but he wanted them to come in and step in explosively and catch the ball and come into a low explosive stance. And this is at NBA level. This isn't like, this isn't like BBL level. This is an NBA level. So you don't come in casually and just pick up the ball like that. So when you see those guys coming to catch the ball, they're exploding forward to get the ball, and they're in an explosive, ready to move stance. It's not a case of you step forward and you're the best player on the team. And he goes, everyone's doing that. The best players in the world are doing that.
Yeah.
So when you see that and you see that explosive stance, it's just interesting you said it. And I noticed that guys, they're the younger players in Ireland that I've seen in the Super League that are starting to come on. I still don't see that. They catch it, ready to catch it and actually explode up and shoot the ball, are ready to catch it and rip through a guy. They're still not there yet. So I think that's a key point that I've noticed as well. And I might not call it an explosive stance, but it's a similar type behaviors. That's a high level practice habit of you catching the ball, ready to go do something with it, instead of catching the ball, taking a minute, and you're just, it's too casual. It needs to be at a higher level. When you catch the ball, you're ready to go do something with that. And it might be a pass, and it might be a shot fake or whatever it happens to be, but it needs to be at a higher level as soon as you're ready to get the ball, and even before you get the ball, that you're primed to catch it and go do something with it. So it was just an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of like, especially in lockdown, one of our phrases is technique over outcome. I mean, we don't know when we're going to get back on the floor right now. So I mean, so one of the things that we've developed is in all our practices, technique over outcome. Right now, we're not even looking at essentially the ball going in. It's like it's all technique. It's all, and the outcome will come eventually. But if you stick with the process, it'll come, and we've enough time to change a few things. And I've seen so many players that have struggled over the last couple of years, and I suppose I've changed my coaching style during whole COVID, and I'm kind of experimenting myself just as much as the players are experimenting. And they've really bought into it, like, and it's been great, like, and they've just really stayed with the process, because you're all we're teaching us technique over outcome, and they're like, yep, we've enough time, and stuff like that. So I think it's, the players want to get better. They really do. And if you don't want to get better, no matter how talented you are, I think one of the reasons why I was always so assertive is I just believe every player wanted to get better. And now I'm at a point like where I'm just like, if you don't want to get better, I just keep going with the fellas who do. And it's not a defeatist attitude. I just feel that I've just seen so many players not wanting to be pushed, believe it or not. And
I believe it.
It's no matter how talented they are at underage level, they're just not going to do it. If they don't want to put the work in, they're not going to get there. I've seen so many players that have been at the tail end of their teams all through their juvenile careers, and they're really talented basketball players at the next level. And the guys that have been at the forefront, they don't make it, or they drop out and stuff like that. So I think I've just learned to kind of, let them lead on what they want to go, and if they want advice, and you're just there for it if they want it.
They wanted, yeah, and there's the spectrum of players that want to learn versus, I mean, you can get literally both ends of the spectrum where is one guy is listening on your every word and I was taking in everything, and then you'll see them go away and come back and get better, and then you'll see the talented guy, the talented bit lazy kind of.
I mean, like, people would say that Neil Sabata was the best Bosman in the league last year. I think there was 2 or 3 of them up there at that level, but so that, yeah, all right, okay, what am I doing here? What am I not doing here? Please hold me accountable to this. Please hold me accountable to this. Okay, Neil, are you sure? Yeah, please hold me accountable to this. And I'm like, God sent, like, it's just like, oh my divine word. Like, I mean, you just wish everybody was like this, and being able to be self-directed. So like, it's getting to a point now where like he knows already himself, I mean, and he would be very upset that he got called for so many foot violations last year, we'll say. So, I mean, he's put an awful lot of work into it, and I've seen a completely different player,
Okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, and you see that mindset is massive, and underage to try, and it's hard to teach that sometimes. So if the kid has it, then, and they're talented, that's the dream. Then obviously it's not everyone that has that. I'm just aware of time here, and it's hit like 10, so I'll finish up. We could go on. I'm sure we could go on talking for a lot longer. I'm sure we'll find a day for a point at some point in the future.
No problem.
So, favorite Super League player last year? I just thought you a random question.
Who did I enjoy watching last year?
Yeah, who did you enjoy watching? Because I mean, there's a few guys there now I enjoyed watching, including.
Tell you what, now, I mean, I
won't bias you. Go on.
I'm a sucker for guys that are young, because I suppose that's just what I've always coached. I don't want to be cliche, but I am going to be cliche. But I enjoyed watching CJ.
Yeah, me
I
too.
enjoyed. I mean, come here to me. I mean, CJ just. I mean, Adrian's done a wonderful job with CJ. I mean, people forget who he's had as his coach and forget that he's his dad, but his coach. I mean, I think Fulty is up there in. I mean, he's just to me. He's like he's there. Like I mean, he's top notch. I mean, there's few coaches in the country that I can just say, yeah, you're top notch, and I think Fulty is one of those. But CJ enjoyed watching. Um, I enjoyed watching. I think there's players I enjoyed watching. There's teams I enjoyed watching, and I think Marion, for all the players they lost last year, were very
Yeah.
enjoyable to watch. I think Giannis is another one of those guys. I think I enjoyed watching Tralee later in the year. I enjoyed watching. I enjoyed watching. Um, I enjoyed watching Templeogue. And I think Mark changed his style a little last year, and it was very refreshing to see that. And I enjoyed watching Randolph. I just like watching good shooters. I think I thought the year before, I thought Fergie O'Sullivan like just down the stretch shot the ball extremely well. Um, there were times I enjoyed watching Neptune early. I really did. I thought they were really good early.
Yeah, they were very
You
strong
know,
early. They didn't
yeah.
lose a lot of games in the first half of the season.
That's it. And I thought they were really good. But again, that'll be learning for that young core going forward and how to manage the thought process of the change of what happened and how that happened. I think that's part of learning. Who else were good to watch? It's so long now. I mean, you nearly forget
Right. Yeah.
who was there.
That's a good feel. Like just to touch on them, CJ. I said this in another podcast too. I was actually just because there was so much kind of hype around him and stuff. I was actually excited when I was coming back to Ireland. I thought I'll play in the Super League for another year, and I'd be like, I can't wait to play against this CJ kid because there's a bit of hype around him. I actually want to see what he's like. And of course, first game he comes out, and I was like, let's see if he can come get to the rim and stuff. And I got switched on to him, and he just gave me a head fake and went straight by me. And he's not like crazily explosive or anything, but he just has a very high IQ and just very subtle kind of. And I don't know if he even knows that he has that. He knows he has an ability, but he just has an uncanny ability for the game and very heady player. And the fact that he was able to, he gave us 27 points. Yeah, and our point guard I think might have been a bit sick that game. At least he would say that. but he gave us 27, and he's 19 against a Super League team, and we did all right last year. We weren't a bum team.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember I watched a scrimmage last week with Gary Walsh, and like technically Gary's the slowest player on the floor, but like there was a play in the game. I've been watching the scrimmage, and I was like, and there was a break, and Gary made an outrageous pass, like, and I just said, Gary, you're the quickest guy out there, and they all looked at me as if to say, like, what the hell is, and like his brain was just so far of everybody. He couldn't handle it athletically, but he was in the right space all that because he was able to see and read the game, and he was able to get to where the more athletic guys were, and he was able to get steals. And I'm like, how the hell is he doing it? Because he read the game. His brain was quicker than everybody else's feet. Right. And CJ has that in abundance. I mean, there's so many clips I cut from the Europeans last year where it's just like he stopped and he's gone. He stopped, he's gone, and he's in space and he's dumping to Sanmi or he's kicking out for Tamar Harper for an open look and things like that. You know what I mean?
He kind of naturally knows where to go on the floor. I see what you're saying. Yeah. And there's guys like that. I think Paul Cummins made a great shout for his favorite player. It was like Steve James for
Steve James. I mean, Steve is a great kid.
That he's because we were playing in the scrimmage last night, and he's one of these guys again that he might not be the standout guy or do anything particularly flashy, but he does a lot of stuff very well. And one of the things he does very well is the help side defense. And as you say, he might not even be super quick, but he'll be first guy to he'll see the help side coming. Yeah, way before it happens. He obviously knows the guys who are going to go too. He just gets across and puts his body in the way. And that is huge. I mean, nobody else does that quite like that on their team. I mean, there's Neil's pretty good at it too, I suppose.
Yeah.
As well. But that helps them so much. I remember he came across and helped on me, and I chucked up a terrible shot as a result. And some guys like that can read the game ahead of us are
yeah. I think one of the big you talk about experience. I think one of the biggest lessons I got. We played Temple Oak 2 years ago, and we played them up in the Opera Hall, and we were 9 up with 3:37 to go. Game was done. I mean, unexpected result. Game was done. And there was a situation where the 3 referees were when we got Lorcan went for a layup off the left wing on the bleacher side of the Opera Hall, and Jason Clean flat out pushed Dave Murray in the back, and it was missed. And I'm losing my life. And we let that momentum get to us, and we missed a layup on the buzzer to win the game. We ended up losing in overtime, but the game was done. And I remember having a conversation with Jason afterwards, and I said, that's probably where, as a guy that's coached young players all along, I've yet to kind of see the experience of what experienced players do. When the game is over, how do we get back in the game? Do we take a gamble? Game is over anyway. And if we get away with it, we could be back in the game. And I remember having that discussion with Jason and saying, right, he deliberately pushed. And if he got away with it, they're back in the game. And if he doesn't get away with it, well, the game's over anyway. Yeah. And I'm like, that's like the dark arts that you only get from experience. And it was only after I was fuming with the referees afterwards, and I knew 2 of them really, really well, and I absolutely, and to this day I still say, like, I mean, last year, one against Temple Oak, one against Tralee, and I know Pat won't be happy with me saying this, but like I just felt that we just got the raw and the stick, a couple of calls on the stretch, but like that's the experience. I think when you're experienced, you know when the game is done, and you're like, right, I'm not going to leave this go with a whimper, but like, what kind of dark arts? And if we get away with it, we're back in the game. And if we don't, well, the game's over anyway. And I just thought it was a brilliant learning thing for me as well, I'd like to still think I'm a young coach, but with young coach that coaches young players, like how to kind of say, well, but this is coming, or can we do this? And I think you kind of get away with it more if you're an experienced player. But that was a massive learning curve for me that night.
Yeah,
and that,
Yeah, and an experienced player knows when they can do that, and it's especially at the end of the game, the refs are more likely. Now it depends on the ref, but I mean more likely to swallow their whistle on stuff like that, and kind of they get away with that at the very end of the game, because they don't want to decide the game on something as maybe as small as that. You know what I mean? They don't want to make that call, so you're putting them under pressure to do something or not do something, and they don't really want to decide the game. So probably a good move by Jason. Jason's a pretty savvy guy. Okay, I've got a final one for you, and this is the last one. So, coaches, what other coach would you like to see on here? Maybe 1 or 2. So, what other coach would you like to see come on the podcast that you might like to hear from? An Irish coach, or
so friendly with all of them, or put me in a bad spot.
I would just pick, like, is yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, like I just said a bunch of them there. I mean, I think Giannis, Pat, Fulty. Cool. I think we've seen a bunch of young coaches on Fusion and stuff. So I think, I think it'd be nice to hear some from experience stuff and what they've learned over COVID. I think would be huge. What kind of philosophy changes would they have?
Cool. Okay, but those three guys are definitely good. Yeah.
I think the one thing, and I've had some good battles on the year with Markeen, and I'd love to hear like how he's been able to maintain that level of success in one respect. How he's able to manage constantly having the high level players. Like I mean,
it's impressive.
Yeah. So it's. I mean, he's gotten me a couple of times. So but yeah, but I think. Yeah, I mean, they're 4 guys that have been around the league quite a long time. I think everybody else is relatively new. I'm missing anybody.
I think that's 4 pretty.
Joe, I'd like to call out now, and he's dodged me on a bunch of occasions. But I think Brian O'Malley needs to get his rear end out there and talk about some stuff. I mean, he's he and I have some very healthy debates at camp every year, and I'd love to see him kind of go into some stuff. But
okay, right.
I'm trying to think who else is out there. I'm gone.
That's all right. That's all right. No, like, that's four really good guys there, and definitely Foti, I had certainly planned to. I think he should be able to go on and chat a bit, and I think I was going to ask Mark eventually, and I do agree. Like Mark has a great coaching aptitude. I mean, he's just what he's able to do. In terms of recruitment, and then in terms of actually just as a coach in game, he seems to make the right calls a lot. He's got good judgment, and maybe that's his point guard. Playing at the high level, he's got very good judgment. I saw a clip from our game that we played them in the final of the National Cup, and he said something really simple, very simple, but very, very brilliant. And it's not something that I would have ever occurred to me to say to a team. But he had the guys in, and he kind of just. It was a kind of a height of tension. We just made a run. I think there was 2 points in it, and there was a timeout called, and there was 2 minutes left. It was a classic scenario. And then he just stopped and he went, "This is where our calm and our experience comes in." He didn't talk about X's and O's, and he just said something very calming, and then he just gave very clear directions. And it was just, I thought it was brilliant, because I can imagine as an inexperienced coach, you wouldn't necessarily know what to say, or you might be trying to draw up a play in your head and panic and say too much. But he was just so calm, and that was, I thought that was brilliant. And it's just such a small thing. So it was just seeing that made me think, like, that's, as a player, that's a great thing to hear from your coach. That he has confidence in you, that you have the experience, you've been here before, and to stay calm and not panic.
Yeah, no question.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm thinking of doing a round table of coaches. I don't know if I won't put you on it down. So if you're keen for that, I might get a few coaches on, and we can have some discussions about various things. But yeah, listen, thank you very much for coming on. I know,
Mark, it was a pleasure, and it was
2 hours of grilling.
I think the one thing about this is, like, and I think, I've been on the other side of that where we're given it, but I think when you're in these positions, you get asked questions maybe you normally wouldn't ask yourself, and it helps us with our own learning as well, as much that we're trying to talk about our own experiences or whatever. So it's been great, and thanks for some of the questions you threw out there. It's been well worth it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's the whole idea, is to try and get discussions going. I mean, like, it's not necessarily that it's going to change or the whole thing, but I just think the more discussions that happen with Irish basketball, the more people will learn and just opening everything up. So that's the plan. But listen, just thanks once again, Paul, for coming on, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon.
Sure you will.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate it.